something left you feeling a little heavy or maybe reminded you of what still matters? If you're here for a story that's gentle on the surface but reaches something deep inside, you're in the perfect place. Today, I want to share the story of two souls, both carrying quiet grief in very different ways. Harry Bennett, a tech billionaire who once believed he had everything: success, recognition, a brilliant wife, and a little boy who lit up his world, until it all shattered the day he lost her. And Natalia Rivers, a former midwife whose entire world unraveled after losing her only daughter in a tragic accident. No one to come home to, no reason to keep going. They met in a cemetery, where most people come looking for closure, not new beginnings. But there, in a moment filled with silence and rain, something quietly began to shift. Not love, not yet, but maybe the first breath of healing. Harry Bennett visited the cemetery every Saturday, always with a bouquet of white lilies and a worn-out novel, one his wife used to read aloud on quiet afternoons. He never cried. He simply sat there, still and silent, as if waiting long enough might somehow bring her back. That morning, the rain came early. So did she. A woman stood just a few steps away, her arms wrapped tightly around a bundle of fading wildflowers. Her hair clung to her face, soaked, but she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes held a kind of pain Harry knew all too well. Her name was Natalia Rivers. She hadn't come out of habit, but out of heartbreak. She came to visit a small gravestone just a few feet from where Harry sat, the final resting place of her 7-year-old daughter. They didn't speak at first, just a small nod, a glance, the quiet kind of recognition that doesn't need explanation. Natalia was the first to break the silence. "She was beautiful," she said softly, her gaze falling to the photo etched into the marble. Harry nodded once. Natalia looked down at the flowers in her hands. "So was mine," she added, her voice barely above the rain. It wasn't fate. It wasn't even a connection. It was simply grief recognizing grief. And sometimes the places where we say goodbye are the places where something else begins. Life has a strange way of bringing broken people together. Just days after the cemetery, Natalia spotted a flyer posted near the local bakery where she occasionally stopped by. The handwriting was simple, nothing flashy, but it read like a whisper of something meaningful. Looking for a part-time caregiver for a 6-year-old boy. No formal experience needed, just patience and a warm heart. She didn't know why she called. Maybe she needed the work, or maybe, deep down, some part of her heart was still looking for something to hold on to. The voice that answered was Harry Bennett. They met again at a quiet cafe. Not out of chance, perhaps. Grief had already woven a thread between them. Harry didn't go into details. He simply placed a photo on the table, a boy with deep brown eyes, holding a stuffed animal a little too tightly. "My son Leo," he said. "He stopped speaking much since Sophia passed. I don't need someone to supervise him. I need someone to be there, really be there." Natalia didn't respond right away. She understood what that kind of silence meant. "I'm not sure I'm the right fit," she said honestly. "I'm still figuring out how to stand up again myself." Harry gave the faintest nod. "Maybe that's exactly what makes you the right one." When Natalia met Leo a few days later, he didn't greet her, didn't cry, didn't smile. He just looked at her, then turned away. She didn't push. She just sat on the floor, a few feet away, pulled out a box of watercolors, and started painting an unfinished picture she brought from home. No introductions, no expectations, just presence. The first few days were slow, quiet, but not uncomfortable. They built towers with blocks, baked cookies, read bedtime stories without asking questions. And then, one afternoon, as Natalia sliced apples in the kitchen, Leo looked up and said, "You do things like my mom did." Natalia paused, then turned. "Like what?" Leo thought for a moment, then shrugged. "I don't know, but I don't feel sad when you're here." That simple sentence, so pure, so unfiltered, stayed with her the rest of the day, not because it hurt, but because, for the first time in months, it made her heart feel warm. And Harry, watching from afar, saw it too. The house that had once echoed with laughter and then silence was now filled with little footsteps again, the smell of baked cookies, the soft rhythm of a bedtime story. Natalia hadn't fixed anything. She had simply arrived, patient, honest, and quietly bringing back what they never thought they'd feel again: hope. Not all healing begins with big, bold moments. Sometimes it starts with quiet presence and small, consistent acts of care. Natalia never asked Leo about his mother. She never prodded, never pushed, but when he occasionally whispered her name, Sophia, as if afraid the word might break, she listened, always with her full attention, never interrupting, just present. She began to cook meals that Leo mentioned offhandedly. Mom used to make this, not to replace his mother, but to let him feel like she was still part of their everyday moments. She found Sophia's old art corner tucked away in a back room, carefully dusted the shelves, rehung unfinished paintings, and brought light back into a space that had been left untouched for months. Harry noticed all of it. He didn't comment, but every evening he began making 2 cups of tea instead of 1, setting one down across from his in the living room, just in case Natalia joined. One night, long after Leo had gone to bed, Natalia wandered into the home's library. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper, with golden light spilling over wooden shelves and floor-length curtains. Harry was there, seated in a leather chair, a book open in his lap. He looked up, and instead of surprise, there was a quiet smile, as if he'd been expecting her. "Do you read poetry?" he asked, holding out a worn anthology. She took it, flipped gently through the pages, then began to read aloud. Softly, her voice wasn't theatrical, but soft, sincere. Each word landed between them like a gentle rain falling on dry earth. They didn't talk about what was growing between them. They didn't name it, but it was there, in the subtle glances, in the longer silences that no longer felt heavy, in the way Harry now lingered by the kitchen doorway just to hear Natalia laugh with Leo. And Leo, he no longer had nightmares every night. Sometimes he tiptoed into Natalia's room with his pillow in hand. He wouldn't speak. He'd just crawl beside her and fall asleep. Harry, once a man of logic, control, and calculated success, was learning that the most meaningful things in life weren't measurable. And Natalia, once a mother without a home, was starting to feel seen again, not as someone broken, not as someone lost, but as someone who mattered. Not everyone welcomes change easily, especially when what they loved most has just been taken away. Genevieve Bennett, Harry's mother, wasn't cruel or unkind. She was grieving. Sophia hadn't just been her daughter-in-law. She was family in every sense, thoughtful, kind, and the person who made Genevieve feel like Harry had found the love of a lifetime. So when she arrived at Harry's home one quiet Saturday and saw Natalia in the kitchen with Leo, giggling as they baked cookies, something sharp twisted in her chest. She didn't say anything at first, just smiled politely, sat down, and watched. But later, in the backyard, she pulled Harry aside. "She works here?" she asked, careful to keep her voice neutral. "Not exactly," Harry replied. "She cares for Leo, and she's here, like part of the family." Genevieve's gaze shifted to Leo, who was now covered in flour and laughing freely, a sound she hadn't heard in so long. "Do you still keep photos of Sophia?" she asked suddenly. "Of course. They're everywhere." "Does she know that?" "This isn't about replacing her mom." Genevieve turned away, her voice suddenly quiet. "I know, but when someone meant everything, being replaced by a new routine, by new laughter, it feels like losing them all over again." Harry didn't answer. He understood. She wasn't trying to sabotage anything. She was just afraid. Afraid that letting someone new in meant letting go of the person they lost. Natalia sensed the shift after that visit. Genevieve grew more distant. Polite, but restrained. No warm greetings, just nods. No questions, just silence. Still, Natalia never pushed. She didn't try to prove herself. She simply kept showing up. With patience, with kindness, with care. One afternoon, Genevieve arrived early. She found Natalia kneeling beside Leo at the dining table, helping him with his letters. The boy looked up, grinning proudly. "I think my mom used to help me like this too," he beamed. Natalia smiled softly. "Your mom sounds like an amazing woman. I'm just here to help you feel safe." Genevieve didn't step in. She didn't interrupt. She just stood quietly behind the door, listening. Later, as she left, she paused at the doorway and said, barely more than a whisper, "Thank you for being gentle with him." Was it full acceptance? Not yet, but it was a beginning, from a mother slowly learning that love doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving space for something new to grow, without erasing what came before. Winter passed quietly. There were no snowstorms, no loud celebrations, but inside the Bennett home something warm was slowly unfolding, soft and steady, like the first snow that melts before it settles. Leo had changed. He smiled more now. He talked about his school days, proudly displayed crayon drawings on the fridge, and every evening he'd ask, "Is Miss Natalia having dinner with us?" as if her presence was just part of life now. Harry noticed everything, and deep down, he knew Natalia had become more than just a presence in their home. Late spring nights brought with them a crisp chill and a stillness that seemed to slow time. That was when Harry and Natalia often found themselves sitting together at a late dinner when Leo had fallen asleep, when the house was quiet, wrapped in the soft golden glow of the living room lamp and the faint rustle of wind against the curtains. They never tried to define what this was between them. They simply talked about the smallest things, about Leo's least favorite vegetables, about the books Sophia used to read before bed, about how Natalia had embarrassingly learned to tie her shoelaces at the age of 10. One night, Harry asked gently, "You've never talked about the father of your daughter." Natalia went quiet for a long moment. "He left when I told him I was pregnant," she finally said, eyes fixed on the tea in her hands. "Said he wasn't ready to be a dad, then vanished." Harry said nothing, he just listened. Natalia took a slow breath, as if each word was holding back a flood. "I thought I wouldn't survive it. But then she came into my life, and everything had meaning again. She made me feel whole." Her voice trembled. "But then life took her away too. A reckless driver, a red light. 1 minute and she was gone." Silence fell between them, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, only felt. A single tear slipped down Natalia's cheek. Harry moved closer, quietly, respectfully. He didn't offer hollow comfort, no promises. He simply placed his hand gently over hers. "You didn't deserve that," he said softly, "but you're still here, still gentle, still brave enough to love Leo the way you do. That's something to be proud of." Natalia looked up at him. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else now. Gratitude, and a quiet spark of trust. From that night on, something changed. Not in dramatic ways, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet space between them, now filled with deeper understanding, stronger trust. Leo began referring to Natalia as "my special person." And Harry, he began to notice something, too. When Natalia walked into a room, the air felt lighter, and his heart, once sealed shut from pain, began, slowly, gently, to open again. No declarations, no rushing. Just two hearts, once broken in different ways, slowly finding their way toward each other. Summer arrived, as if life itself was softening. The house that once echoed with silence and loss now buzzed with laughter. Leo ran through the hallways. Natalia gently reminded him to wear his shoes, and Harry, always nearby, watched with a heart slowly mending. No one rushed to say, "I love you," but some truths don't need to be spoken. Natalia was there in every meal, every nightmare soothed, every quiet glance exchanged in the late hours. She didn't replace Sophia. She simply rebuilt the space where love had once lived. And one afternoon, as the golden light filtered through the garden trees, Harry knew it was time to stop holding his heart back. He brought Natalia to their favorite spot in the backyard, the little table where they often shared tea and slow conversation. Leo was nearby, coloring a picture, humming a tune to himself. Harry took her hand. No rush, no spectacle. "You came into my life when I truly believed my heart would never heal again," he said gently. "I used to think love only happens once, that when it's gone forever." Natalia didn't speak, but her fingers gently closed around his. "But then you showed up, quiet, unassuming. You didn't try to stay, and yet you stayed." He pulled a small ring from his pocket. No diamonds, just a simple silver band with one line engraved inside. "Where love begins again." "I'm not asking you to fill a space someone else left behind," Harry said. "I'm asking you to build something new with me. Because loving you has taught me that love doesn't end. It evolves. It finds its way." Then he knelt down, eyes steady. "Natalia, you didn't make me forget Sophia. You helped me understand that healing and loving again can exist in the same breath. Will you marry me?" Natalia didn't answer with words at first. She simply bent down, wrapped her arms around him, and held him tight. Then, softly, she whispered, "Yes." Leo clapped and cheered, like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. And beneath the golden sky of a quiet summer evening, with no grand stage or applause, just the laughter of a child and the warmth of a healing heart, they didn't find the end of something. They found a true beginning. And if this story touched something in you, even just a little, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part stayed with you? What did it remind you of? Feel free to share your feelings or reflections in the comments below. I read every word, and they truly mean the world to me. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Noah Stories. Your support helps keep this space alive, a space for softness, hope, and the quiet beauty of healing. Thank you, truly, for being here. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself, and never forget, sometimes love finds us exactly when we've stopped looking.